Woods, Akira Kurosawa, the incredible Japanese filmmaker, or Martha Nussbaum, the extraordinary American political philosopher. Here at the Blavatnik School of Government, we partner with the Kyoto Prize to celebrate it, to bring the Kyoto Prize winners here to the heart of Oxford University, because they enable us not just to hear about the cutting edge of technology, of science, of art and philosophy, but to invite all our colleagues from other parts of Oxford, from Oxford's high schools, from other universities. The Blavatnik School of Government is a department of Oxford University with a mission to improve government around the world. It's to help people learn how to serve, to lead, to govern with a clear sense of who they're serving and why.
For too long, universities have hidden behind an ivory tower, and the commitment of the Blavatnik School is to open up the work of the university to the world around it.
Oxford University is full of brilliant researchers, teachers, students, working on some of the world's biggest challenges. What we love to do at the Blavatnik School is to bring them together with some of the leaders who are making the actual decisions and help be a portal through which all that brilliant research can actually be used and have impact. Every year here at the Blavatnik School, we're delighted to host the Kyoto Prize Lectures. I was so excited to see the latest Kyoto Prize Laureates. James Gunn, the astrophysicist, Ariane Mnouchkine, the theatre director, and Ching Tang, whose research brings us things like the OLED screen.
But both Oxford scholars and the Kyoto laureates are animated by a thirst for knowledge, an energy and a commitment always to improve, never to be satisfied. That's what makes excellence. The University of Oxford is a deeply international institution. We have partnerships across the world. We always have. We accepted our first international student in the year 1169, and we have been welcoming students ever since. The mission of the Kyoto Prize is the very same mission that animated the founders of this university almost 900 years ago. A commitment to excellence, a commitment to using that excellence for the betterment of society.
These values of humility and service, but also of outstanding excellence, are exactly the values that we hope to reinforce in every student that walks through the door. So this panel discussion today is a unique part of the Kyoto Prize at Oxford. It's an opportunity to hear at a more personal and broad level from the laureates. And do join in. If you've got questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to start by asking the laureates about what they strive for in their work. So James Gunn, I'd like to start with you. You're an astrophysicist at Princeton who's helped the world discover how galaxies form and the properties of space between them. You're married to a fellow astronomer, Gillian Knapp, and I do wonder if your two children grew up thinking it was normal to discuss quasars and dark matter at breakfast. But why don't you share with us what it is that you strive for in your work, Jim? Share with us a moment of joy from your work.
Well, that's a fairly hard question. I've been at this a very, very long time, and I think that notion has changed a lot. When I was a young man, I did theory, and so there were moments of just light bulbs going off when you could solve a problem that you had been thinking about a long time. And I often solve these problems when I'm asleep. It's a rather strange thing. But more lately, I've been working on big projects with lots and lots of people. And the joy that comes is in many forms. One is to watch the rest of your team solve problems, because what's really important, of course, is the problems get solved, not that you solve them. Mm-hmm. And especially if your team is much younger than you, to watch this whole thing happening. And the big project that I think I was mostly given this prize for, the Sloan survey, was a fight because it was a very, very large collaboration, really the first of its kind in astronomy. And we were short of money, we were short of time. People wanted to cut corners. And so there, the inspiration was quality, always. Do things right. It costs less in the long run, actually. Rather different things, and maybe a little unusually for a scientist, for me.
And what was the fight? Was it a fight within the team, or did you just mean it was a fight to get the money and time
No,
to do the work?
it was a fight within the team. It was partly because there were many institutions involved. There was a sort of clash of cultures between universities who were used to doing things in a very open way and government labs who were not used to doing things in a very open way. And the level of formality was very different. And so, many of the people in the team just wanted to get there and cut what corners were necessary. And I just fought very, very hard, always for very high quality work. And in the end, I think the results justified my view. But of course, I would feel that way, yes.
And what do you do to restore yourself after a long drawn out fight to get that quality? How do you relax after that? How do you restore yourself?
I don't find it necessary, actually. The joy of winning, I guess, is the word you want, of making things come out well, is very large. And so I guess I don't really think very much. Well, there's always another problem looming, of course. And so there's not much time to relax. But just the joy of being able to do things right is really quite sufficient, I think.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to turn to Ariane Mnouchkine, who's joining us from her home at her theatre in Paris, and to whom I want to say welcome back to Oxford University because of your special connection with Oxford. I know you came here as a young student and made your mark on the Oxford University Dramatic Society. You know, your work, founding the Théâtre du Soleil, you know, your extraordinary staging of works from Euripides to Shakespeare to Molière to films. There's a lot of joy in it for the rest of us, but what is it that you strive for in your work, Ariane? Could you share with us a moment of joy from your work?
Well, it's strange because I'm probably going to answer something quite near what James just said, because well, he's searching to solve some problems. And we are searching in science, in astronomy, and we are searching for theater. And so the joy really is when we find theater, because in fact, we don't know when we start a rehearsal whether theater is going to happen or not. I mean, putting actors on a stage with words and actions, in fact, is not sufficient to be sure to have a moment of real theater. And sometimes theater doesn't appear. I mean, it refuses itself to us. So that's the fight. It's to not let go. It's to admit that this is not theater, whether, although it seems nice, it seems even funny, but it's not theater. Mm-hmm. So and as a team, the joy comes from the moment where, from one actor or one actress or a number of actors, finally or suddenly, theater is here. And he's right, James is right. It's a restoration in itself. I mean, it's the joy that is given to us and the joy that we are, through that theater, we are going to be able to give to other people, theater lovers. It's a name in itself. So it has a lot to do with happiness. It's very, I mean, you know, even now miseries, even the weeks where theater has not been, you know, the weeks where everybody goes home saying, well, it's not very good what we're doing with, that's not what I want, it's not what. And finally, all these little miseries and, well, it makes happiness. So
your work feels very politically engaged. Is there part of you that that sees theatre as politics, as a political message, or is that just me sitting in a school of government reading into it?
No, it's both. It's not. No, I wouldn't say we are striving to find a political theatre, but because I think theatre in a way is always political when it's good theatre. But of course, we are citizens like every citizen in the world, so we receive what is happening in the world. I don't want to use the word opinion, because I think opinion is in a way is an obstacle. But we have convictions, we have principles, we have feelings. A sense of humanity, a sense of justice, a sense of danger, a sense of. So that, of course, all these things influence our work. But I would not say, in fact, I would say the contrary. We are not starting a rehearsal saying this is going to be political. We have to give this message. This is what we think. In fact, I think what happens is, who is that person, that character that is supposed to go on stage now? Who is he? Who is she? Where is he? Where is he or is she a monster? Where is she a human being, which means a monster and a lovable person? It has, well, it's political as humanity is political, not less, not more.
Thank you. Ching Tang, I'd like to come to you now. You were born and grew up in Hong Kong, very much a Hong Konger, and an extraordinary physical chemist. Your lecture this morning was just wonderful. But you seem to me to have combined brilliant science with quite a practical eye to how to turn it into innovations and technologies that make a difference to all of us. You know, every time we pick up our mobile telephone, we benefit from your work. But tell us, what is it that you strive for in your work, and share with us a moment of joy from your work.
Well, growing up in Hong Kong in a small village, I need to do farm work for my mother, and so I was sent out to the field, a rice field, during the school breaks to do the weedings. And you have to put your foot in the field, and it's wet, and then you bend your neck, your back, and you're trying to do the weeding. And so I was maybe 10 years old or something, and I said, no, that's something that I don't want to do. I like to play football. And so I said that, well, there must be a better way of doing things. So I make myself a rack, something that you can pull the wheat out without bending my back. And so that kind of thing stayed with me throughout my life, I guess. I just want to build things, make things. And, so when I was hiring the Kodak, they say, go ahead and make, a 10% efficient organic solar cells. At a time when the efficiency was 0.01% or something. I mean, it's kind of crazy to take up that kind of challenges. But anyway, you get paid for doing that. That was fun. And I was all by myself because the company did not want to invest a lot of money on something that is somewhat risky. So I tried to make it work. And after 2 years, working all by myself in a research lab with 3,000 people, and I'm the only person working on that project. And it turned out wonderful, and I enjoy it very much. Figure out the materials, and the most importantly, the so-called device architecture that I later on applied to organic LED. So I learned how to solve problems, and I don't know, it is maybe a sense of curiosity, and I tried to try, new things. But the main thing is that you have to find a way to do things efficiently in experiment. So if you can do 10 experiments in the given amount of time, you would not necessarily get better results, but you have a better chance of getting some results. And that's big, I guess, in sciences. And the major discovery only comes once in a while. And so the curiosity and having a problem to solve, and trying to figure out how to solve it, I think that is really the fun part. And
it's very interesting because you talk about having to work on your own on this problem and find a solution for it. And I wonder, when did that change? I mean, do you still work alone on your problems, or how did you learn to go from doing it on your own to actually doing it as a team?
I would say through my graduate school, I basically work alone on my thesis project. And then for the first 5-6 years, I'm also pretty much working alone, maybe with one other person. And later on, when the OLED project beginning to to getting bigger in Kodak, it was a time that I realized that there are a lot of things that you cannot do by yourself, and you just have to learn to work with other people, the organic chemists, the lawyers, and all. And somehow I seem to be able to work with them without any problem. Actually, I enjoy doing it. But what gives me a lot of fun is this. Even though we started the OLED research very early on, the Kodak as a company was behind in the research, maybe 10, 15 years later. And the company like Sony, Samsung and LG and all those starting to catch up with Kodak. And you find that they are better at doing certain things, like making the display. We know how to make the material. We know how to, get the device architecture. We want to know how to, but these electronic engineers, they know how to put the things together and make it something that they can sell. So I begin to see the progressions of the OLED technology from the very simple the display to a more complicated one. Each time I see some of them come onto the market or the pre-engineering sample, I find that, boy, this is amazing. It must take thousands of people making these sort of things, and I consider them almost my team members. Somehow they took something so simple in concept and bring it and turn into such a complex device. And if you heard my talk, there's 8 million transistors in your cell phones. and that's amazing. Each one has to be individually addressed. I mean, the OLED, so it's very complex. So you need a whole team of work. So that certainly is an important the the thing that we have to learn to be able to work as a team.
Fantastic. I'd like to move now to a more philosophical question, because we live, I mean, it's a cliche to say we live in changing times. Of course, all times change, but each of you, from astrophysics to theater to technology, are working in a field which is changing very quickly. And Jim, I'd like to come back to you and just ask you a big impossible question. From where you sit, how is being human changing?
Well, I've tried to think about this, and I'm afraid I don't have a very good answer. As you say now, the world is changing very quickly. It's certainly changing in science. Just as an example, if you want to know some obscure fact, it would take you a week to find the book, a day or so to find the answer in the book, and now you just go to the web. And so Wikipedia alone and Google and so on has just changed the way science has done. There are also some social things that have really changed the way science is done, just because science is more and more being done by large teams. But I think the big change, not necessarily for scientists, but for the rest of the world, is that the world is becoming enormously complicated to the ordinary citizen, and that's something that you must think about a lot in the government, in trying to think about government. I think people understand the world a good deal less. Not that we as scientists understand the world a good deal less, but the ordinary citizen understands the world a good deal less than he or she used to. And that, I believe, is a very disturbing thing. But I also believe that we are just seeing the tip of that iceberg, because as AI comes along, we will be dealing with, basically, in many ways, another intelligent species, which may be antagonistic or may be beneficial, or probably both. And so I think it's changing because of technology. But as I say, it's going to change a great deal more in the future. And what being human will mean 20 years from now, when your companion may be a cell phone that thinks like you do, I really don't know. I find the concept rather frightening. I'm old enough that I don't think I'll see it. But it's quite concerning to me.
Mm. And just coming to your own thinking about, when you discover or you tell us about galaxies, does that discovery change your sense of what we are as humans?
Not very much, I think. It is often said that studying the universe gives you humility, and I cannot disagree with that. And the more we discover, the smaller we become, on the one hand, in lots of ways. Actually, it's not just astronomy. I believe that we're discovering that many animals are almost as smart as we are, and all of these things attempt to put us in our place, which I think is considerably less far up the totem pole than we're given to think. On the other hand, when I give public lectures on this subject, I nearly always talk about discoveries that are so amazing that the human being has been able to think about this. You know, there is a microwave background which comes from heat, basically, in the very, very early universe. And the details of that and what it can tell us, we knew very little, but various people, Jem Peebles in particular, sort of figured out what was going on. I find that astonishing, that on the basis of very little, the human intellect is able to come to this. And so, you know, that is not so humiliating. But finding our place is I think very, very difficult when one is in this science.
Thank you, Jim. Ariane, can I come to you? And can you share with us, Ariane, what you think it is to be human and how that is changing?
Pardon? What did you say? I'm sorry.
So how do you think being human is changing?
I think I'm going to switch to French, if you don't mind.
And for the audience, you can go straight to the interpretation button on the bottom of your screen and listen in English.
Alors,
so, I don't know if I completely agree with James. I'm not sure. Not completely, because James is speaking as the big wise man that he is. And I'm sure that he can probably see that as far as his talents extends, he can see that at the end of the day, we are all more and more ignorant, which is very complex. That is to say, the more science knows, the most the coma of the common mortals extends, the more humans are ignorant. But if the Neanderthal is walking around in his cave when there's a storm, a mysterious storm, he and his family would not know where the fire and that heavenly anger came from. And so I'm not sure that this man believed he knew more than us on these things. That I do not know. But what I do know is, based on your question, when you say, is man changing? Are humans changing? It's almost as though there were a fear embedded within that question. Are humans becoming less human? Are we scared of becoming dehumanized? And I think we are right to fear this. We should fight against any potential dehumanization. And I'm answering this question with questions, but sometimes when I want to stop my grandson of being on his phone too much, well, not his phone, but a phone, or being on a screen, I know that I want to fight against some potential dehumanization at this stage. But at the end of the day, humanity has had to face many moments of dehumanization. After all, think of Nazism. Was that not more dehumanizing than a telephone? They succeeded in dehumanizing one of the peoples who were one of the most cultured peoples in the world. And this without phones, without internet. Didn't take very much. It took a fistful of men. What about the Khmer Rouge? Without phones. They dehumanized a whole era of their country. And so at the end of the day, I think that as long as our children will know what it is to love, to feel friendship, to feel tenderness, then that caution that we feel against the other it's not a phone that's going to dehumanize us. And I don't think it will be science either. On the contrary. Science that is controlled, I would say, so not in the hands of the devil. Of course, when science is in the hands of the devil, that is dehumanizing. But when science falls into the right hands, it doesn't have to be dehumanizing. We're very thankful, we're very grateful for, in a year, having managed to get a vaccine, which will more or less save humanity. So I don't know, to answer your question. I am scared sometimes. I'm scared that soon we will not know what a poem is. We will not know what a real book is. That we will no longer know, or we won't know extremely important things. We won't know how to work with rice, as Ching was saying before, other than with machines that are owned by these big multinationals that end up speculating based on rice grains. So we are now in a time that is sometimes terrible, awfully dangerous. But really, humanity has always gone through periods that have seemed just as cursed and dangerous. Maybe this is a sort of a lack of humility at the end of the day. I don't know what's more dehumanizing than certain ideologies. Ideologies where there's been some access to power, and then for 10, 5, even 20 years, even longer, sadly, then a whole country falls to ills.
And do you think that theatre and film is a way to fight for humanity, for humanizing in a time when some forces dehumanize us?
Well, of course, I think that. I'm pretentious enough to think that. We are all theater people and cinema people and writers and artists. They think they are fighting for humanity. It's probably true in a way. It's minusculement, je refais appel à Claudia, mais
Anna, it's minimally true. We are minuscule fighters for humanity.
I wonder if when people come into your theatre to watch theatre together collectively, to feel some of the love and friendship that you talked about, is that
or not only feel love and friendship, they also have to be enlightened. I mean, they also have to recognize the power of hate and of hubris. And theater tells everything. Mm-hmm. Theater should be able to represent everything, the worse as the demon and the angel. C'est un public, quand il est au théâtre.
When the public is in the theatre, the public must be nourished with everything. And you have to give it to them. At the end of the day, you have to give them the tools for everything so that they can face everything. So love, which is not negligible, and of course they need to face Macbeth. They need to face a haunted man, a man haunted by evil, by ambition, the deadly ambition.
What happens when people watch your theatre on their little screen in their own home? Is that taking something away from,
well, if they do
humanizing it, feeding
yes,
it?
If they do that, it means that they're looking at one of our films. Mm-hmm. So doing a film on one of our play, we are really trying to compensate what they will lack, which is the life of an actor, of an actress. And we have, when you're filming a play, you have to in a way, you have to film it as a theater spectator would look at it, because when there's the public makes its own editing of the play. They make the close-ups. They do panoramical movements of the camera, which is in a way their eyes. They decide to look at this one and not at that. That is in a way guided by the director. But sometimes you have to trust the public to know exactly what they want to look at. You have to leave that freedom to the public in a way. When you film the theater, no, you have to do it in its place.
Thank you, Ariane.
Sorry.
No, continue, please.
No, I was so when they, as you said, looking at it in their home, it means that they have been kind enough to buy a DVD of ours, and look at what the film we made of a place, which is something else in a way. It should compensate. Well, most of it. It doesn't. In a way, it doesn't. Theater is life. I mean, it's some living beings looking at other living beings, and that makes it irreplaceable. I mean, that makes it something different from any other arts in a way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Ching Tang, it's your inventions that bring us these little screens that people worry might dehumanize us. Do you think being human is changing?
Well, yes, of course. Being human is changing because the technology changed human beings. 10, 15 years ago, you don't have the cell phones. You spend hardly any time. The phone is for you to talk to, not to you to text or to watch television with, and so on. So that completely changed the habit of people around the world. I mean, this is amazing to me that I don't know whether it's changing for the good or for the better or for the worst. That still has to be determined. But one thing I do know, that the being human is very difficult, because you are not alone. You are in a society, and depends on where you are. There are certain regulations, the rule of laws, which could be very arbitrarily written, and you have to abide by it just because you live there. And it's happening to where I'm living right now, slowly changing. But the voice of the human, I think, in my thinking, is getting weaker and more silent. Maybe even with the phone, you don't even have to speak. At least in Hong Kong, I kind of sense that people don't talk as much anymore. There's no oppositions. Talking. I guess just because there is an ironclad rule that you have to observe a certain behavior. And then in the U.S., I also a citizen of the United States. You have you're human there too. I mean, you live there, but that society is also very chaotic. And I have to say, we had 4 bad years, and we don't know what the future is going to look like. In all the crimes, all the hate crime taking place, and I don't know how one strive to be a better human being. And there's a certain basic principle that we have. And that doesn't matter what we do. I mean, being kind to each other, being able to work with each other, I think that defines us as a human being. And I'm afraid that is changing very rapidly. Just imagine what Jim talked about AI. We scientists can create a robot. It could be a good robot, it can be a bad robot. And the person who controls the robot can control the human being in the future. And that's very scary.
We have
and also sorry, I mean, also the big sciences require collaborations, across the countries, and that may be happening in some area, but now between the U.S. and China, that is making it's very difficult to do in big projects.
I wonder whether you're optimistic that technology can be a force it can be a force for those who seek a different freedom. So when I think about the young protesters in Cairo's main square using their mobile telephones to text, as a way to express themselves and demonstrate, is that gone? Is that extinguished? Or are you optimistic that the human being, technology, as Ariane said, in the hands of the very powerful can be a tool of oppression and dehumanization? Yes. But it can surely also be a tool of human invention to subvert the rules. But are you optimistic that it can be the latter?
No, I'm not optimistic at all, because scientists can create sophisticated tools, but also very sophisticated weapons to kill each other. And that has been going on, as a human race, through the centuries. And I don't know whether that will change in the future. Getting a better technology would not necessarily make the human race a better race. No, I'm not very optimistic. But on the other hand, something like the cell phones, if you use it for pure enjoyment, that's great. But you can also use it to the detriment of other people's. So it cut both ways. And the real problem is that you only need one single individual in the world to ruin it.
So what, when you're looking for optimism, where do you look, Professor Tang?
I guess I go to a tennis court to play tennis.
And you, Jim? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry. I listened to J.S. Bach. It's very, very hard to be pessimistic when you're listening to J.S. Bach. On the other hand, I agree with Ching about this. I think technology is by itself not good or bad, but it certainly can be used for good or bad things by people. The question of robots, which he brought up, I worry about people controlling them, but I also worry about them controlling people. So what's coming, I think, is quite scary. What's here is already quite scary. But I agree with everything he said about this.
One of you referred to robots as a species, but that's a very biological term.
Yes.
To refer to something which doesn't live and die, but rather exists.
No, but it may live. It may not die. So I think about it as I think the question is not living or dying. The question is sentience.
What?
and just how intelligent these things will be. I think it's almost immaterial whether they're mortal or not in the sense that they die, but it matters a lot whether we as human beings can treat them as a thinking thing that is at our level, and that's coming. I don't think there's any question that it's coming. You know, it won't be next year, but it's coming, and that will really change what being a human being is, I think.
So when you look 5 years ahead, Jim, what does that look like for you? What's the upside and what's the downside?
Oh, I don't think things are going to change very much in the next 5 years. This is a kind of creeping thing, right? Well, I mean, we all may be dead 5 years from now if the U.S. and China can't decide to get along. But that's an event, will be an event, not something that's sort of changing our lives. And what form this will take, I don't know. And what the time scale is, of course, I don't know. But it's coming. And I think we better be mature enough to handle it. And the human race, has not been astonishingly mature in the past handling these questions, just ethically, morally, even operationally. So I don't think I could guess.
And just to be clear, when you say being mature, do you think we need to regulate or control the evolution of sentient robots?
Yes, in a way. I think, there are science fiction writers who have dealt with this, the sort of laws of robotics, basically, that you make the robot a beneficent thing. I think it very, very unlikely that we will be mature enough to do that. It's as Ching said, we're capable of producing these terrible weapons, and weapons that think are pretty frightening. But that's coming.
Wow. Do you share that view, Ching? Sorry, you're on mute.
Yes, I do share that view. That is a very scary thought, and but we have to be optimistic. We can't, always live in the thinking that the end is going to come. In the next 5 years, I think, yes, nothing dramatic would change unless some major, war break out. But we have to think 25 years from now, 50 years from now, maybe 100 years from now, what human going to look like. And it's not that far. You're talking about one generation. My grandchild is 7, right? And they could possibly live beyond 100 years old. And at that point, what the human race be like? And I have no idea. And science can do a lot of good things, but that also can help to destroy this earth.
Ariane, you have been more optimistic than our fellow scientists.
Parce que moi, je pense, j'écoute ces deux très grands savants. I'm listening to these very, very two great scientists. But je me dis, mais je ne veux. Est-ce que je peux me permettre?
What I can allow myself to say is that I want to ask more of them. They must not, they cannot paint an apocalyptic picture of the universe to our grandchildren without also giving us tips on how to resist this. Now, I expect from science that it will continue because science is also part of humanity. Humans, men and women, are wise within their souls. They are researchers of the soul. That is also humanity. Humanity is seeking, and they who seek shall find, whether good or evil. But when you have two wise men who are wonderful gentlemen to boot, tell me simply that the universe is scary to think of, and I do know this. I mean, it's quite simple. We're being told this all the time. But if they tell me this, then I need them to tell me how we can resist this, or how I can tell my granddaughter, my grandson, who are between 8 and 10 years of age, I want to know how I can tell them how they can prepare to resist this and save the world. That's it. This is what I expect from science. I want science to tell me how we will save humanity, and not how we're going to annihilate it and turn up with these inhumane creatures. No, this is insufficient. No, not at all. It is not enough. Technology is scary and frightening, yes, except when it saves a cherished being during an operation when they're having cancer removed. You know what I mean? There's something beautiful and wonderful about science. It can be the source of great good. Now, there are evil things, but I want to know what to do so that all these awful prognoses do not come to be, because I know that out there, there's a whole youth out there who's trying to save the world, who is trying not to become dehumanized, as you say. It's not a question of optimism, and it's not a question of pessimism. It's simply a question of action. As I was saying, human beings are seekers, are researchers, and they are activists. So let us have some trust in the illuminated part of humanity. We will not leave our grandchildren to be completely surpassed by machines and have their brains taken away from them.
To each of our Kyoto scientific laureates. So Ariane's challenge to you back, delicious gentleman, as she described you, is
a great scientist.
You can't leave us with an apocalyptic vision without one word of advice from each of you about how human beings can ensure that doesn't happen. So what is your advice to her grandchildren and to your own grandchildren about how to make sure the apocalyptic vision doesn't happen? So with just 1 minute each, that's a tall order. But Jim, do you have an answer for Ariane?
I wish I did. You know, the religious among us are exhorted that the important thing is to love one another. And I think that if we can learn that, we will survive. And I'm afraid that if we can't, we won't.
But religion has nothing to do with that. Let's love one another, and let's forget about religion maybe for the moment.
But I think it has nothing to do with religion, Ariane, but it's the single most important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And we have to learn to do it as a race, and we have not done a very good job.
Thank you, Jim. And Ching?
Well, I would tell my grandchildren to live a good life. And a good life means that you have to be kind to each other, to be helpful. And if you want to be a scientist, you can be a great scientist, but I would tell them to avoid weapon research. So you have to be able to direct the scientists to do something that may be less dangerous. But I don't know whether it can be done, because scientists by nature are very curious. They want to find solutions. If you give them a problem, they will solve it. So that go back into the good and the bad issues. And I don't know, but I'm reasonably optimistic that with some discipline with the scientists, and we would be able to be less pessimistic for the future.
Thank you so much. So it's through those human qualities that each of our laureates has talked about: kindness, love, tenderness, empathy, but also, as you rightly remind us, Professor Ching Tang, of being very aware and conscious and smart, and making sure that as human beings, we do regulate ourselves. I want to, time is up. This conversation could go on, but Ariane Mnouchkine, Jim Gunn, Ching Tang, I just want to thank the three of you for this very special conversation. I look forward enormously to the lecture that Jim Gunn will give in a very short while, and Ariane Mnouchkine will give later today. And I hope you can all join us for those events. I'd like to thank, on behalf of all of us and the Inamori Foundation and the Inamori family, our three laureates for this conversation. Thank you all very much. And here are the details of the other events today.